Here's the reality. The most dangerous INFJ is not loud, not aggressive, not even visible. It is the one who no longer needs approval. And that changes everything. Because when an INFJ stops seeking validation, something quiet but powerful happens inside them. They stop explaining. They stop proving. They stop waiting. And in that silence, they become almost impossible to control. This is not about being harmful. It is about becoming untouchable. In this video, we will explore 12 reasons why the most dangerous INFJ is the one that doesn't seek validation. Stay with this until the end. Because reason number 9 is where everything shifts. 1. They no longer shape themselves to fit others. Most INFJs grow up learning how to adjust. It starts very early. They notice small changes in tone, subtle shifts in energy, unspoken tension in a room, and without thinking, they adapt. They soften their voice. They change their words. They become what the moment needs, not what they truly are. At first, it feels natural, even helpful. They believe they are creating peace, keeping balance, holding everything together. But over time, something fades. Their original self becomes quieter, less visible, less expressed. They begin to wonder why they feel unseen, even when everyone seems comfortable around them. Because comfort was built on adjustment, not authenticity. And that realization changes everything. When validation is no longer needed, the pattern breaks. Slowly, but clearly, they pause before adjusting. They notice the urge to shape themselves, and let it pass. They stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What feels true to me?" They stop bending, even in small ways, even in silent moments. They stop editing their personality to make others comfortable. They allow their natural tone to remain, their natural thoughts to exist, their natural presence to be felt. They speak less, but more truthfully, and their silence carries more weight, because it is no longer filled with hidden effort. This is where people start to feel something different, something they cannot easily explain. The INFJ is no longer smoothing every edge, no longer filling every gap, no longer absorbing every emotion. And that shift can feel unsettling to those who were used to the old version. Because now, the INFJ is not performing. They are not adapting to expectations. They are simply being. And that authenticity is powerful, but also intense. Especially for those who relied on the INFJ's flexibility. Control becomes harder. Influence becomes weaker. Because authenticity cannot be shaped from the outside. It stands on its own, quietly, firmly, and without asking for permission. 2. They become emotionally independent. INFJs are naturally empathetic. They feel everything, not just emotions, but intentions, energy, unspoken meaning. They care deeply about how others feel, sometimes more than they care about themselves. And because of that, they often look outward for emotional grounding. A kind word, a sign of approval, a simple reassurance. Something that says, "You're okay. Keep going. You're doing it right." These small signals become anchors. They help the INFJ feel stable, safe, connected. But over time, this creates dependence. Not obvious, not dramatic, but subtle. Their emotional state begins to shift based on others. A positive response lifts them. A negative response unsettles them. Silence creates doubt. And slowly, they lose their internal center. But something changes when validation is no longer needed. The shift is quiet, almost invisible at first. They begin to notice their own feelings before looking at others. They sit with their emotions instead of immediately seeking confirmation. They ask themselves, "What do I feel?" Not, "What should I feel?" And that question builds something new, an inner foundation. They become self-validating. They no longer need constant reassurance to trust their experience. They allow their emotions to exist without external approval. They trust their own feelings, even when others disagree, even when others do not understand. They trust their intuition, even when it cannot be explained. They trust their perception, even when it stands alone. and this creates emotional independence. A calm, steady state, where their inner world is no longer controlled by external reactions. This is powerful, because emotional independence changes how others interact with them. Manipulation becomes ineffective. Guilt loses its grip. Pressure loses its force. Because the INFJ is no longer reacting from a place of emotional dependence. They are grounded, centered. They listen. They observe. They understand. But they are not easily swayed. Not easily pulled. Not easily shaken. Their emotions belong to them. And that changes everything. 3. Their intuition becomes sharper. INFJs are deeply intuitive. It is one of their core strengths. They sense patterns. They read between the lines. They notice what others miss. And often, they know something before there is evidence. Before there is proof. Before there are words. But when validation still matters, that intuition becomes clouded. Not because it disappears, but because it is questioned. Doubt slowly enters. Quietly. Consistently. They feel something, but then pause. Is this accurate? Am I overthinking? What if I'm wrong? And in that pause, their clarity weakens. They look outside for confirmation. They compare their instinct with other opinions. They wait for agreement. And that waiting creates noise. The more they seek validation, the more disconnected they become from their natural insight. But when validation disappears, so does that interference. The noise fades. The hesitation softens. They begin to trust the first signal again. That quiet inner knowing. Their intuition becomes clearer. Not louder, but sharper. More precise. More immediate. They no longer delay their understanding with doubt. They feel it. And they trust it. Without needing to prove it. Without needing to explain it. This creates a different kind of awareness. They see patterns faster. They recognize intentions earlier. They understand situations with less confusion. And their decisions reflect that clarity. They become calm in their choices. Not rushed. Not reactive. Just certain. And that certainty is not based on logic alone. It comes from alignment. From a deep connection to their inner world. And often, their decisions are surprisingly accurate. Not perfect, but consistent. Because they are no longer filtered through external approval. They come from within. And when intuition is trusted like that, it becomes one of the most powerful tools an INFJ has. 4. They stop over-explaining themselves. Many INFJs explain too much. Not because they like talking, but because they want to be understood. They want clarity. They want to prevent confusion. They want to make sure nothing is misinterpreted. So they add more words, more context, more detail. They explain their intentions, their emotions, their reasoning, again and again, hoping that this time, it will be clear, hoping that this time, they will be fully seen. But often, it leads to exhaustion, because not everyone is trying to understand, and not every situation requires explanation. When validation is still important, they feel responsible for how others perceive them. So they keep explaining, trying to shape that perception, trying to guide it, trying to fix it. But when validation is no longer needed, something shifts. They become quieter. Not distant. Not cold. Just clear. They begin to trust that their words do not need constant expansion. They say what matters. And they stop. They allow silence to exist. Without rushing to fill it. Without feeling uncomfortable. Without needing to clarify every detail. They remove long justifications. They release emotional overinvestment in how their words are received. They accept that some people will understand. And some will not. And that is enough. This creates a strong presence. Because clarity carries weight. Simplicity carries confidence. And when someone does not feel the need to over-explain, it signals something deeper. Self-trust. Boundaries. Inner stability. People begin to listen differently. Not because there are more words, but because there is more certainty behind them. And that certainty speaks louder than explanation. 5. They become unpredictable. People feel safe with patterns. They observe behavior. They form expectations. They learn how someone reacts. And then, they rely on it. If a person always agrees, they expect agreement. If a person avoids conflict, they expect silence. If a person adjusts, they expect flexibility. And for a long time, INFJs can fit into these patterns. Not intentionally, but naturally. Because they value harmony. Because they avoid unnecessary tension. Because they understand others so well. But when validation is no longer needed, those patterns begin to break. Gently, but clearly. They no longer react just to maintain peace. They pause. They reflect. And then, they respond based on truth. Not comfort. Not expectation. Not habit. And truth is not always predictable. Sometimes they remain silent when a response is expected. Sometimes they walk away when engagement is assumed. Sometimes they speak directly when softness was anticipated. This shift creates uncertainty for others. Because the familiar pattern is gone, the script no longer works. And without that script, control becomes difficult. People cannot easily anticipate their reactions. They cannot easily guide the outcome. And that creates distance. Not emotional distance, but behavioral distance. The INFJ becomes harder to read from the outside, even though, internally, they are more clear than ever. Their unpredictability is not chaos. It is alignment. It is the result of responding honestly, instead of habitually. And that honesty removes the predictability others relied on, which makes their presence feel different, stronger, more grounded, and impossible to shape from the outside. 6. They are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. This is a quiet transformation, but a very deep one. INFJs naturally want to be understood, not at a surface level, but deeply. They want others to see the layers, the intention, the meaning behind their words. And when they feel misunderstood, it affects them. They replay conversations. They rethink what they said. They try to correct the perception, to clarify, to explain, to make it right. Because being misunderstood feels like being unseen. But over time, something changes. They begin to notice a pattern. No matter how much they explain, not everyone understands. No matter how clear they try to be, some people interpret things differently. And slowly, they accept a simple truth. Understanding cannot be forced. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be guaranteed. And when they accept this, they let go. Not of communication, but of expectation. They stop chasing clarity in every interaction. They stop trying to fix every misunderstanding. They stop carrying the weight of other people's perceptions. They allow others to think what they think, without rushing to correct it, without feeling the need to defend every detail. And this creates space. Mental space. Emotional space. They move on more easily. They release conversations faster. They no longer stay stuck in loops of explanation. This creates freedom. A calm kind of freedom, where their energy is no longer tied to how they are perceived. They still care, but they are not controlled by that care. They still communicate, but they do not overextend to ensure perfect understanding. They accept that being misunderstood is sometimes part of being real, and that acceptance removes fear. It replaces it with peace, a quiet confidence that says, I know what I meant, and that is enough. 7. Their boundaries become stronger. Boundaries are difficult for many INFJs, especially early in life. They feel others deeply. They understand pain. They recognize need. And because of that, they give. They give time. They give energy. They give attention. Sometimes, without limits. They say yes, even when they feel no. They stay, even when they feel drained. They tolerate, even when something feels wrong. Because part of them still seeks validation, approval, acceptance, connection, and boundaries can feel like a risk to those things. But when validation is no longer needed, the dynamic shifts. They begin to listen to their own limits, not just others' needs. They notice when their energy drops, when their space feels invaded, when something feels misaligned. And instead of ignoring it, they respond. They say no, calmly, without guilt, without long explanations. They walk away when necessary, not dramatically, not emotionally, just clearly. They limit access. They choose when to engage, when to step back, when to remain unavailable. And they do this without seeking approval, because they no longer need permission to protect their energy. This changes everything. Their boundaries become firm, not aggressive, not rigid, but steady, consistent. And people feel that, even when nothing is said, there is a quiet signal, a presence that says, "This is where I stand." And that presence is respected, or avoided, but rarely ignored, because strong boundaries shift the entire dynamic of interaction. And for the INFJ, it creates a life that feels more balanced, more aligned, more sustainable. 8. They detach from toxic dynamics. Validation can keep people in places they have outgrown, in relationships that no longer feel right, in environments that slowly drain them, in patterns that repeat without change, because part of them still hopes, still tries, still seeks approval, still wants things to work. INFJs are especially prone to this. They see potential. They see what could be. They believe in growth, in healing, in understanding. So they stay longer than they should. They try harder than they need to. They give more than is returned. But when validation is no longer needed, clarity arrives. Not suddenly, but steadily. They begin to see patterns without emotion clouding them. They recognize what is consistent, not just what is possible. They see manipulation, without excusing it. They see imbalance, without justifying it. They see disconnection, without trying to force connection. And this awareness changes their response. They stop trying to fix everything. They stop carrying responsibility that is not theirs. They stop overextending their energy into situations that do not change. And instead, they detach. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with calm distance. They step back. They reduce engagement. They create space. And when needed, they leave. Quietly, without drama, without announcement, just a clear decision. This detachment is powerful, because it is not reactive. It is intentional. It comes from understanding, from self-respect, from inner clarity, and it shows something important. They are no longer tied to external approval. They are no longer staying to be accepted. They are choosing themselves. And that choice changes the direction of their life. 9. They become internally aligned. This is where the real transformation happens. When validation disappears, the INFJ begins to align fully with themselves. Their thoughts, their values, their actions, everything starts to match. There is no more internal conflict between what I feel and what others expect. And this alignment creates a quiet strength, a grounded presence. They are no longer divided. They are whole. And when someone is internally aligned, their energy changes completely. 10. They influence without trying. INFJs naturally influence others. But when they seek validation, that influence is subtle and often hidden. When they stop seeking it, something shifts. They stop trying to impress. They stop trying to be liked. And ironically, this makes their presence more impactful. People notice. People listen. Not because the INFJ is louder, but because they are real. And authenticity draws attention without effort. 11. They no longer chase relationships. This is another deep change. Validation often drives the need to hold on to connections, to maintain relationships, even when they are not healthy. But the evolved INFJ lets go. They do not chase. They do not cling. They allow relationships to exist naturally, or to end naturally. They choose connection, but not at the cost of self-respect. And this creates space for healthier bonds, stronger bonds, more genuine bonds. 12. They become deeply self-sufficient. At the core of everything is self-sufficiency. Not isolation, not detachment from the world, but a deep sense of inner stability. They do not rely on others to feel complete. They do not need constant reassurance. They do not need to be seen to know who they are. And this makes them powerful. Because when someone is self-sufficient, they cannot be easily controlled. They choose. They act. They move forward from a place of inner certainty. And that is what makes them the most dangerous. Not in a harmful way, but in a way that is free, unshaken, unreachable by manipulation. So if you see an INFJ who is quiet, who does not seek approval, who does not explain themselves endlessly, do not underestimate them. They are not lost. They are not disconnected. They are centered. And in that center, there is strength most people will never fully understand. If this resonated with you, sit with it. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformation is not loud. It is silent. And it happens within. Take a moment and ask yourself, are you still seeking validation? Or are you finally starting to trust yourself? The answer to that question changes everything.